Thank you. So now we go into debate.
Debate on the substantive matter.
Yep, debate on the on the main act. So anyone would like to start off debate? Mark would, and then Pauline.
And it's 3 minutes for all speeches except the. But you don't have to. No, you don't have to.
It's not a
Deputy
prerequisite. So
Except
Mark,
the
yeah, thank
proposer
you,
and
Mark.
seconder.
Thank you. Whilst I understand the advice that we were given by Mr. Hardy, I don't like being bullied by Wellington into making a decision that's not good for our city. I do understand that intensification is needed, that we must stop spreading out. We know that. But to have this prescribed on us from on high in Wellington, with their terms, their heights, and their prescription, I find objectionable. And I've listened to my community out in Hornby, and whilst I'm sure they're flattered to be seen as a major centre, part of the city, to try and impose on the good people of Hornby a 20-metre or 6-storey imposition is not sitting well at all in our community. It's going to fundamentally change the character of our suburb. We don't believe our infrastructure out there is anywhere near up to scratch to accept the intensification that's being attempted to be thrust upon us. We're already having problems with our infrastructure, having blockages and needing to be cleared on a weekly, if not daily basis in places. Our roading is groaning hugely out there. We've accepted a lot of Quaker refugees. Thousands upon thousands of people have settled into the southwest, and you're proposing to put yet more thousands overlaid onto that. This is, I'm sorry, intolerable to my community. So I'm going to have to stand up and say no to this. I don't believe it's right that we're putting the cart before the horse. We should be doing all this spatial planning and careful planning of what we need to do going forward. To be strong-armed into this by our dear friends in Wellington, I think it's wrong message being sent to councils that we don't count, that we don't know our areas. Well, I'm sorry, but we do know our areas, and we do understand that we need to plan for growth, but to thrust this into communities before you put the infrastructure in place simply is not acceptable. The physical infrastructure is one thing, the rapid transit, we're talking about, I think I heard 15 years to implement the mass rapid transit, and to put all this housing in there in the meantime without the way of getting in and out of this housing it's lunacy. So I'm sorry, but today I'm going to have to vote no.
Okay, thank you, Pauline.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, there's a lot of this I still don't like, in the one-size-fits-all concept, but I want to thank all the people that came in to make deputations, and something that took my attention from the Riccarton Bush deputation was the pictures that showed us the setback of the 3 to 6 stories at 1.5, and it just, to me, just looked really awful, it looked harsh, and I was worried about the footpath being potentially shaded and icy all winter if that was facing a certain way. So, I don't agree either that over-intensification will lead to affordability. I believe that affordability is market-driven by supply and demand, and since Christchurch is not short of land within our city limits and on transport routes and around shopping centres, we can provide an increase of supply without the obligatory densification and loss of sunshine and amenity and trees, and within our current district plan. I mean, just look at what's happening in Edgware and Addington and everywhere, we see it already. And this is just going one step further. And I'm just wondering if something like this could go into the covering letter, and it's up to you, Phil, but rather than trying to cram 3 by 3 stories on one section, that we encourage or legislate that larger sections can only be intensified because they can be developed on as community-friendly dwellings by design, as we heard from the deputation this morning, or micro-community development. And it provides more options for layout and landscaping and things like that. So, that's just an aside. But look, thanks staff again for coming up with evidence-supported qualifying matters that you have. You've actually performed a miracle. You've found a good compromise for Christchurch. And yes, it is tinkering, because that's the only room we have, because the government has legislated. We're under statute. And for me, the risk of doing nothing today and not notifying is too great. That's my firm view, that a commissioner will be appointed, the commissioner will notify, and it could be with 0 qualifying matters, which would be the worst outcome for everyone who has submitted to us and made a deputation today. So notifying today will formalise the process, and so people can be heard at the hearings panel. So I think from what is becoming quite a common place I find myself in, that is between a rock and a hard place, I will vote to notify today.
Victoria.
Yeah, thank you. My thoughts on this issue really have evolved over time as I've gained more knowledge on the subject matter, and as a new councillor developed a deeper understanding of the current and the future challenges that our city and our region is facing. I'm really grateful for the constructive conversation today, and also leading up to this, I'm grateful for the public who have presented today and have spoken, and people who have emailed us with their views. Also to the staff, thank you, and for the time that you spent with us, some of us individually trying to get our heads around this. It's a really complex issue. Top of mind for me today is what type of city should Christchurch be in the future? What is our vision for the city? And some of us touched on this in our early days when we all came together as councillors. So I challenge my fellow councillors today to think about that when they're making this decision. And I think it's time for Christchurch to really accept and embrace its role as the second largest city in New Zealand. We're not a small town anymore. We know that our growth predictions are really, really significant. And let's not forget that we've already got residential intensification happening across our city in certain pockets. And so the challenge for us is to manage our growth in a really smart and efficient way. And we know that density can be done well, and it can bring, when done well, can bring really significant benefits to our communities, as we've heard about that today. So returning to our vision as councillors, I ask you, is your vision for a vibrant and a sustainable city, or is your vision for a continuation of what we've already got? And I think that this really reflects the dilemma that plays out for us today, that highlights our dual role as councillors, where we're asked to be an effective advocate for our respective communities, but at the same time as councillors we are tasked with making strategic decisions for the greater good of our city and of our wider region, and that is the dilemma that we've all got. For me, as a former lawyer, I can't ignore the risk, and I'm really cognizant of our legal obligations and not notifying the plan. Thanks for spelling that out. We've played our chance card. The government gave it to us and we've played it. So for me, at the end of the day, this really does come down to risk, and I don't think that we'll get another chance. So whilst the plan is by no means perfect, the reality is it's a rock and a hard place, as Pauline's mentioned. I'm satisfied that for the most part we've addressed the issues we can with the qualifying matters, and let's also not forget the various legislative and regulatory controls that we've got for us to utilise that you have mentioned for us today. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Vic. Melanie.
Last September, after we voted no to Plan Change 14, I had a varied response from residents, which wasn't helped by the impending election. I had one election sign graffitied, not bad, and one ripped off the fence of a new development. The people who did this clearly wanted me to vote in favour. But when I turned up to the Sprayed Neighbourhood Network that evening after the decision, I received a round of applause and the promise of 2 votes in the election per resident if they'd been able to do so. It's interesting. Didn't it? It's interesting that this time round I've had a number of emails, and we all have, to support Plan Change 14, and I realise that many of the residents' associations still have great concerns. I understand the anxiety that they have. There are pros and cons of developments. In the paper earlier this week there was the article about the new subdivision on Clyde Road and Island where dozens of mature trees were cut down. The developer said he cut the trees down after the lessons of a previous subdivision where he'd left very beautiful large trees on site only for new owners to quickly cut some down, and we should be concerned. But I'm pleased we have the proposal again in the plan change to require developers to retain 20% tree canopy cover on sites or pay a financial contribution to compensate. This sends a signal that council, although maybe not those in Fendleton, Waimari, Hereward, that we're serious about retaining trees for the variety of important reasons that we know that we should. But it's also great to think that the situation I highlighted earlier on Clyde Road, oh, I've already said that, so I'm lost my place. The other great concern brought up allowing higher density housing is a loss of sunlight to neighbouring properties. I really want to congratulate our council staff who've come up with the qualifying matter to increase sunlight access with their radiant recommendation to decrease the height from which the recession plane's measured from 4 metres to 3, and this has been validated by NIWA. I realise some of those who want Plan Change 14 to go ahead do not want council to support the sunlight qualifying matter. I understand the rationale, but we will all hopefully be old one day and potentially unable to go outside or get upstairs to find the sun. This feels like a case of old versus young, rich versus poor, renters versus homeowners, but this is one of those times when I believe a balancing act is necessary, and we can't just do that by continuing to sit on the fence. Last September, I said I would like to vote against the plan change so the government could take full responsibility. However, this time round, I don't think we should point the finger, no matter which finger it might be, at someone else. I think council should take responsibility for our own actions here. We can take control by passing our version of Plan Change 14, which balances the needs of the people of Christchurch as best as we're able, and send this off to the hearings panel to receive submissions in a full and fair process.
Tim.
Yeah, thank you. Look, first of all, I want to thank the public for coming in and the residents. It's been great to hear concerns as we have before. I have huge faith this time round in the Independence Hearings Panel, as I did not in the previous one, following the earthquake. We've extended from 20 days to 30 days, which I think is a very good thing. But I'm still concerned that we are being forced, as Mark said, there's no way around that. But I am really concerned that I would hate to think that we would cut off our nose to spite our face, because we could be in a far worse place. I want to thank staff for the work they've done. And I am really disappointed in Wellington. With Three Waters, they gave the example of Scottish water. And the reality is we have very little in common with Scotland, even though my ancestors came from there. I wish they had looked at Benny Gilling's presentation with regards to the Canadian area, the Halifax Regional Municipal Residential Patterns and Plans, and Pattern G on his submission, with urban high density, where we have green spaces in between high density with regards to trees as well. If you look at ours, there are very few trees left and the houses are very close together. And when I asked the question with regards to minor or less than minor changes when going to the RMA, these can actually be made to the sunlight setbacks, recession planes, etc. So in that sense, developers or anyone building can also go through the RMA process for matters that are less than minor. So there can be adjustments there, perhaps not for the positive. So I don't think we have a choice. I think it is D-Day for us, as John Hardy said, so I think we must approve this and hopefully through the Independence Hearing Panel have some further feedback and positive feedback for the people of Christchurch. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake.
I thought you were just going to go down the road, but that's okay. Look, while I've never actually seen the TV show It's in the Bag, I actually thought it was called Money with Bag, but it's called In the Bag. I am familiar with the show's premise, which is, or at least I think I am, which is the more your potential reward grows, at the same time so does your risk. The reality is we've reached a point where we should take the figurative money to avoid what could be in the qualifying matter-free bag. Last year, I think we made the right decision. The plan was not ready. It did not take account of our lower latitude and the shading consequences of that. Now we have a plan that achieves government aims and mitigates negative shading impacts compared to Auckland. But not only that, it allows further time to work through aspects that are still up for disagreement. NDRS won't take effect until the entire process has been completed. Rapid mass public transport is also on my mind today. One other point I'd like to make is that there seems to be hope amongst those, amongst some, to take a further stand here in Christchurch will result in a change in government direction. My feeling is that there may be a degree of wishful thinking here. My read is that while there is an election upcoming, the reality is Christchurch is the only place not yet to notify, and elections are not won or lost on one city alone, nor do they become election-losing issues when both government and opposition are agreed on policy direction. While I respect the point of CRA, I ask what will likely be lost during the process of making such a point which, in my judgment, will not succeed for the reasons I've just outlined. We have to remember what's at stake here. Chester Street East, heritage protections. Heritage protections like in Chester Street East and the inner city west are front of my mind when making this decision today. Chester Street East and the V&A area actually had stronger protections had we proceeded in September with my amendments. However, it's likely the IHP would have disregarded them. But then, yeah, so all, yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the end of it. The only...
Jake, it was going so well.
It was going so well. Look, no, I'll just sum up on my final point, which is there's only so long you can continue to break the law for.
Okay, thank you. Tyrone? Kelly, you didn't have your hand up. Good, Tyrone.
Kia ora. Look, I do want to just make special mention of everyone who's come in to talk to us today. I think that's really great. We're obviously very passionate. It's a complex issue, and so hats off to people who have done that. But I just want you to imagine a neighbourhood where dwellings are tightly squished together with small backyards and houses that abut right onto the streets in a haphazard way. A place where people can see into your living room instead of seeing sunlight, and in some places in the dead of winter, the frost never thaws. A place where there is nowhere to park, what most people would consider to be few green parks, and barely anywhere to walk your dog. In fact, a place where there are barely footpaths, and the ones that are there never see a footpath repair flying squad. So people just walk down the middle of the street because they own the streets. That sounds like a terrible place, and you might think it is. Well, I think it's one of the greatest places in the world because it's Littleton, where I grew up, and it's awesome. And it's a place that elicits the strongest sense of community identity, spirit and heart of probably any community in the country. I'm going to have some water. People in Littleton are too busy out in their community doing cool stuff instead of wringing their hands over the small stuff. They go to gigs, they get involved in clubs, they go to many bars, cafes and restaurants, they debate, they argue, they walk to the market, they enjoy a vibrant arts and cultural scene. And it's not even in the central city. It's miles away from the central city. Urban density makes for vibrant neighbourhoods because there are more people. Neighbourhoods where people are in the streets day and night keep us safer and more connected. Mixed-use neighbourhoods with restaurants, cafes and small businesses provide connection points and places where we can have fun and enjoy life. These streets don't need to be concrete jungles. One story on a big section can be incredibly ugly, and intensive housing can and often is beautiful. Just look at Paris. In New Zealand, we can have native trees and ecological design, and building density can truly be an agent of placemaking, just like it is in Littleton. Low density can lead to bored kids, isolated from cool stuff and dependent on their parents for everything. It leads to adults having to drive everywhere, wasting time on getting to things, sitting in cars, degrading the environment while their own bodies degrade from inactivity. Low density is expensive and to build and maintain. We can reduce rates with more efficient use of our infrastructure. Degradation of our infrastructure leaves us vulnerable. So some people seem to be determined for Christchurch to remain a 20th century city, when it is the things that have happened to Christchurch in the 21st century that have defined us. We are a forward-thinking city, a progressive city, a city that values community and practicality, and God forbid, some people are starting to think that we are cool. What? 10 seconds, thanks, Phil. We haven't got everything right. Right now, God knows Littleton struggles with public transport, but that doesn't mean we can't get them right if we have the vision to do so. If we allow Christchurch to be a sprawling suburban wasteland, we will have shown we are bereft of vision beyond the 20th century, and we will certainly not be cool, and that's why I'm going to vote to notify.
Thank you, Mayor Phil. I think that that intensification is definitely a sign of a mature society, and today I feel like we are waking up as a society and looking at whole new options. When you go to places like Europe, you see intensification done well. You do see some places where it's not done well, but I think that we have a great opportunity. Our population's growing and it's changing, and we're a country that has to step into the future. I just want to congratulate our amazing staff on the work that they've done in providing this evidence. I also want to thank John Hardy, who I think has given us a very clear direction as to how we should look at this. It was really interesting today to hear from young people who are very passionate about our city and the future. We don't often hear from young people, and it's really interesting that they're so focused on the idea of intensification. This will go to a hearings panel. Everyone's voices will be heard, and I think it's a pragmatic decision to notify today, and I'll be supporting that. So.
Not yet. There's 3 seconds gone. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Tēnā rā tātou katoa. I needed that time. I want to take a moment to thank everybody who has spoken out in support of or against this plan change, and as your advocacy has helped us to better understand the complex issues at play. I talk about our residents' associations, thank you very much, and to our young people and to those with lived experiences, thank you. It's a highly contentious topic of which both sides provide robust debate. The benefits of densification are clear and backed by research from all around the world. It can help to address our city's housing affordability crisis, work towards a more climate-focused city, improve social cohesion through meaningful and coordinated planning, cheers guys, where young meets old, and businesses intertwine with residents to help create a more sustainable and circular economy. We must also acknowledge that there are legitimate concerns about the impact of intensification on our city, and those have been well communicated. These include issues such as the potential of increased traffic congestion, decreased privacy, and changes to the character of our much-loved neighbourhoods. I believe that the key of making a balanced decision about the makeup of our neighbourhoods is to approach the issue with an open mind and a willingness to consider all relevant factors. We must carefully weigh the benefits of intensification against its potential costs and seek out ways to mitigate any negative social impacts. I think we have done so in some of these qualifying matters. The decision weighs heavy on all of us today, and I'm happy with all that has gone into this plan. No, I am not. But in good faith, I cannot gamble on this extreme risk, and I'm unwilling to test the government on what they may or may not have in store for us if we push forward with not notifying. As the councillor for Riccarton and the youth portfolio holder, a lot of pressure has been placed upon myself and our others as elected members, and rightfully so. I wouldn't have asked for this job otherwise. A person in our community once asked me, "Do you know what an elected member's job is?" after I got elected. And to that person I say, yes, I do. And I want this to set a precedent and make this very clear. That is to provide a balanced, transparent and open view, to listen to all of our residents' voices, and a reminder to some individuals that respectfully, very respectfully, I cannot be swayed by loud voices, and a reminder that voters want me to vote in a certain way. In doing so, disregarding those that cannot vote yet or those that sit quietly. Riccarton is a ward full of many people, up to 10,000 students, 60% renters and established residents who have lived in Riccarton for 5 to 25 years. Rich and not so rich, young and old. As Riccarton is one of the most heavily affected wards regarding the plan change, I will campaign for our residents' wants and needs and will support them in their endeavour to vouch for our communities' IHP process, whether they want to halt development or evolve it. To our residents' associations, I hear you, I see you, and I'll continue to work with you. Excuse me. It is upon us as councillors to advocate, mediate, and be in service of all of our people. We need good planning. We can't have another Picton Ave. We need more pocket parks, tree canopy, public transport, and a well-planned infrastructure. I'm optimistic in this plan. I'll give it a chance. And as I elaborated to above, I look forward to a more connected and thriving city and ward for us to all enjoy. Kia ora. Sorry, I went over.
And Andre. Sorry, mate. You're all good. Look, I think it was certainly fortuitous that we got that second bite at the cherry with this. And although this cut, I think everyone will agree, is far from perfect, I think we will acknowledge too that it's significantly better than what we initially considered. You know, I really want to acknowledge staff because they have done a superb job working within some pretty tight parameters and working with us. And I really can't sing their praises enough. Also, I want to acknowledge and thank Mr. Hardy too. You know, he's had an unenviable role, and I think he's actually done a superb job, and everything was asked of him. And I was listening to Mr. Hardy on my way back to the chamber on the live stream, and the key takeaway for me really was that, you know, rejecting to notify could well mean that something far worse becomes the reality. So I guess the crux of it for me really is, you know, how many rats are we prepared to swallow, or something, when we consider what that alternative might in fact be. I think one thing I do want to touch on that, you know, that I find difficult with this though is that, you know, as Councillor Henstock, you know, was right in the thick of a plan, you know, for Christchurch 2.0 in the wake of the earthquake when everything changed. And, you know, I find it quite difficult when I look, knowing, you know, how desperately we need to revitalise Christchurch City, which will have that impact on Greater Christchurch. And we sit here now 12 years after the earthquake with a population that's only just reached what it was 12 years ago. You know, so we still have a goal of 20,000 people living within our 4 avenues by 2028. So I find that very hard to grapple with the fact that opening the floodgates for more permissive regulatory frameworks with respect to intensification outside of the 4 avenues is a way to achieve our goals and our hopes and our dreams and aspirations as a community. Look, that being said as well, I think I want to stress that, you know, I'm not opposed to intensification at all. In fact, I'm actually quite supportive of intensification, but the key is it's got to be done well and in appropriate areas. And appropriate areas within the 4 avenues, for me, I think, is a no-brainer and something that we've all worked very hard towards. So, you know, in a way, I think that a plan, you know, or a lot of hard work that's been for Christchurch and by Christchurch does risk being undermined out of Wellington, and I think we've traversed that point well with the copy and paste from Auckland being applied elsewhere. But given that I've got 20 seconds left, I think the main thing to say for me, it's really a head versus heart call, and the heart says reject it and the head says accept it because, you know, it could get worse. Though in saying that, with the benefit of experience, you know, I've been here for 5 terms now as a city councillor, and there are a few times that I've really regretted my decisions, and the times I've regretted my decisions have been when I've ignored my heart. And the truth is, you know, if the government want to do this, the government can. But I'm not going to endorse a plan that I don't genuinely believe in, that I don't genuinely believe is in the best interest of our city.
Thank you. My short will be much shorter than I had planned because my incredibly eloquent and visionary colleagues on either side of me have said much of what I was going to, so I will leave that. But let's just point out that increasing density brings more affordable homes and more affordable rents. It lowers emissions. It has less sprawl across our productive soils. It enables public transport to be viable. It lowers rates for everyone across the city with more people in a more compact form. However, successive councils have failed to enable it, which is why government has stepped in. And successive councils in Christchurch have failed to do their role when they have enabled some small amount of medium density. Riccarton is the key area here. Council enabled medium density and then didn't do its bit. It didn't buy space for pocket parks, it didn't put in street trees, and it didn't enforce parking. It allowed trees to be ripped out. And so the current plan will address all of those things. Do I like it, all of it? No, I don't. And I will be registering my vote against the sunlight qualifying matter due to the delay in developments and the incentives that it gives to developers to knock down as many trees as possible in the next year. Thanks.
Yeah, this is an interesting one for me because I put a search into Google to look at which cities have increased their density successfully. And I'm picking most other people here have done the same and come up with the same answer. Almost none. It's not something you do. The great cities of the world that everyone loves to speak of, your Paris and your Copenhagen and New York and so on and so forth, not New York so much, but the others, the European ones, are very, very old cities. We started very tiny. They were walking cities to start with. We developed in that boom of the 20th century when cities were designed around cars, and to try and change that without comprehensive development is a dream. It's not true. And increasing density does not make houses more affordable. We've doubled the size of our houses since the 1970s. The square meterage is very high, and that's a waste of energy and a waste of resource, but the density is not. And yes, I agree with some of the points that Councillor Peters has made around standing up to the government, but I take on board what Councillor Henstock has said as well, because she's actually a lawyer, and I was the one that left school at 15, but we're both sitting at the same table, so that shows you that you don't have to go to uni. But my point is, all jokes aside, that when you look at the process and can it be done better, I actually say yes, it can. I think Wellington doing it to us does not work. And if this failed today, which going by the votes, and I didn't debate earlier, so I wouldn't have won anyone over, but if I had have and they had all been inspired, we could actually write to the government instead. And if this does fail, I will put up a motion that we write to the government and ask for 2 years, because what I'm hoping as part of next year's long-term plan, we do the share an idea again, and we do it around all of our planning, all of our transport, and the entire way we want our city to look, live and feel and thrive going into the future. We bring in that 100,000 people like we did once, we do it again, and we take that to Wellington and say, this is what a city, when the people have buy-in, looks like. And that's what I wish we were doing today, rather than just cowering down. But if I will, like Mark, vote against, because my spine's going to stay straight as I go to bed tonight.
High density housing units can lead to some good things. I was born in one. I was born in a communist era concrete block in Tugavista, Romania. But I was lucky enough to have the privilege of growing up here in Christchurch and live that Kiwi dream, which is living on a nice big section with a beautiful lawn, cricket bat, all that kind of thing. But getting the balance right between families that need a big section and those who do not is not the balance that has actually been found in this country. So decades of lack of planning have led us to what we've got, which is a housing crisis. We don't use that word much anymore. We talk about a cost of living crisis. The main contributing factor, however, is housing costs that contribute to that. Here in Christchurch, as at December, there were 1,734 people waiting for social housing in Christchurch. Most of those were for a one-bedroom, over 1,000 of them. Another 450 were for two bedrooms. So the overwhelming amount of our social housing wait list is for smaller homes. There are people who are crying out for smaller 1 and 2 bedroom homes. It's not just people waiting for social housing, it's students. Apparently Christchurch is the cool place to be now, I'm not surprised, and there is massive queues of students right now trying to find a place around Riccarton. If you try and find a one bedroom to rent, you're going to struggle. If you try to find one to buy, you're going to struggle. There is a real lack of small places to obtain. And why are they not being built? Because they're not economical to build. plan changes would help improve that. People talk about intensification not being good for mental health. I tell you what's really not good for mental health either is a broken mental health system, being in emergency housing, not being able to leave an awful partner because you can't find your own place, be it small or otherwise, to live in. Not being able to leave an awful flat with messy flatmates because there's no other alternatives. There are also many other things that are really detrimental to mental health, and a shortfall in houses is absolutely one of them. I found it really awful to hear smaller places described as dog kennels and shoeboxes. Some people really just want a place to call home and would prefer a smaller place that they don't have to maintain. In terms of affordability, I don't understand since when does supply and demand not play into affordability and prices. That just doesn't make any sense to me. Supply and demand is absolutely a factor. Increasing supply helps reduce demand. Young people have always been told to buy something within their means. We need to build something within young people's means. Many young people want a smaller home, so we do need to build them, but where to from here? Do I support a plan that includes the same levels of intensity in outer suburbs as inner suburbs? No, not really, but this is what we've got in front of us. As for Hallsville, I understand infrastructure concerns very well. One of the biggest concerns we've got is actually more urban sprawl between here and Selwyn, which will send more traffic our way. That would be one of the biggest concerns. It's too late to intensify much of Hallsville because it's recently been built on anyway, so very aware of that. It almost feels like if you were really pro-intensification, you'd be better to vote no because you are taking a punt on qualifying matters being lost. But on balance, the residents have told us very, very strongly they want these qualifying matters. On balance, I'm voting to send those qualifying matters to a hearing panel. Is what I'm doing. I believe that's striking the balance here and listening. Thank you.
Celeste, you don't often clap for me.
I was clapping for myself there.
Get used to this. Get used to disappointment.
Would I love to vote against this plan? Yes, but actually, do I think about what Wellington will do? And that plays on my mind a lot. If you think about, where we were 6 months ago, we took a real punt for the city. We backed them and said, actually, Wellington, bugger off. They actually did bugger off to their credit for some time and let us do what our planners do well and come up with some creative solutions. We've done a lot of that now, but actually my biggest fear is that if we don't notify this and let the public have their say, we'll be back to where we were 6 months ago. And for parts of town like mine, that would be significantly worse. We've got qualifying matters that make some of it better, but actually a lot of it is still a terrible plan. But in the end, do you weigh that up with government imposing this on us? And if you let them do that, it comes back to that fundamental point of what is the point of an elected council sitting around this table? We have to make decisions. Some of them won't be popular, but they may be the right thing to do. And for us, actually, the right thing to do today is to notify, although people will be annoyed, because if we don't notify, we will have a worse outcome for the people of Christchurch. So, look, if I thought for a moment there was any glimmer of hope that actually a new government, if there was one later this year, and we'll wait and see, with a bit of luck there will be, but if there is, actually will they change it? They won't. I've spoken to the opposition. They are very adamant that actually they are joint with Labour on this. And so there's absolutely no point in passing this back to Wellington unless ultimately, you effectively don't believe in local democracy. And I do, so I'm happy to make a hard call today, which is to notify the plan, although a lot of people will probably say that's a terrible decision for the city. In the end, if we don't do it, government will, and it comes back into question, what is the point of local democracy if you don't make hard decisions?
Thank you. Yanni?
Thank you to the staff for the work that they've done. I think I still remain deeply troubled by the fact that the social impact assessment is being done during the process after we've notified rather than to inform us before. But we've heard from people that we need to notify it so we can move it to the next step. And the only thing that gives me comfort in that is that because of the qualifying matters that we've put on, the plan doesn't become effective until it's gone through the hearing panel process. So we do have more time now to consider in our submissions as a council and as the community, the social impact. Just yesterday, I was criticised for wanting the Ferry Road pedestrian crossing to go ahead in the draft annual plan because it would give people false hope to something that wasn't deliverable and that we couldn't achieve, despite us already having plans for it and already having money on budget. I find ironic that a number of councillors in this debate today are saying that this plan will address housing affordability and will get us a more compact form. I encourage you all to read the staff assessment, the section 32 on page 18, that states very clearly, the housing market in Christchurch is not influenced by factors within its boundaries, but also the Greater Christchurch sub-region. There continues to be significant housing choice and enablement within the sub-region, and including substantial greenfield developments in the district of Selwyn and Waimak. It says, without a major change in housing preferences and choices, potentially influenced by other government initiatives to incentivise and disincentivise choice and preference, the increased enablement for higher density is unlikely to give rise to the desired and necessary market shift to realise a more compact urban form. Furthermore, given the required price points for apartments to become feasible, it is difficult to see the private development market delivering substantially more affordable options. For those councillors who today have expressed concern about trees and about affordability, I remind you that this council over the previous few years has had ample opportunity to put in plan changes to get more trees notified in terms of our significance list, which hasn't been supported. We've had pressures to do the social and affordable housing plan that has been constantly delayed and not being implemented. And even going back to 2007, we were supposed to be looking at inclusionary zoning. So in my view, we should notify the plan change today to give the community the ability to have their say, but we should be under no illusion that the staff assessment has been very clear. This plan change does not address housing affordability and does not lead to significantly improved urban compact form. Finally, I believe this process is completely wrong. We're currently consulting on a Greater Christchurch spatial plan. That should be the first thing we do before we do the specifics of the fine-grained detailed planning. Let's have the conversation with our community through an open and transparent process instead of a rushed plan change that government wants us to do.
Thank you. Right. Oh, you would. Celeste, what would you like to say?
Oh, I just wanted to conclude, and I'll keep it brief, by thanking everybody. I think the quality of the discussion's been really great, and I also want to acknowledge that it's not often that Councillor McDonald and I agree on something, but I think that's a reflection of the fact that we've come through a process and we've heard a range of views, and I think we've come to a very, where I feel like we've heard some diversity of opinions, and I think that's really helpful to make a good decision today. So from my perspective, it's understandable that people have concerns about intensification. However, I think we also have a responsibility to balance out concerns with our obligation to act in the interests of not only the people we're representing here today, but the future generations that are going to be inheriting these decisions. So, as people have said, we're the second largest city, so we also need to consider how we're going to live and travel in the future. So I'll be voting for Plan Change 14 today. I'm actually quite positive about what this enables. High density living, it allows us to plan around public transport, it allows us to reduce emissions, and it makes it easier for people to live in walkable neighbourhoods. And I just want to acknowledge comments made by my colleagues over to the left. This is also about climate and resilience issues. Density, done well, addresses transport emissions, as I've said. It helps address pollution, and it makes Christchurch a more livable city. So, I think we need to be looking to the future. I don't think this is the perfect solution. I have concerns about some of the qualifying matters, including the sunlight access matter, and also I'm not sure that we have an evidence base to cover qualifying matters for areas such as Wicker and Bush, but on balance I'm happy to vote yes, so that's what I'll be doing today.
Thank you very much, Celeste, that's great. Right, today we have a tough decision to notify or not notify the plan change needed to put the new law into action. In 2022, I voted against notification because I didn't think that this worked well for Christchurch. And to be honest, I still don't think the law works well for us. And it's poor policy making. And our residents gave us a clear signal to say no. They pointed out the problems with this rush law and made it clear that it didn't work for our city. In the end, we did not support notifying the plan change. The government then took a measured approach with the appointment of John Hardy and we know they could have gone a lot harder on this and forced the plan change, but they have given us more time. John has worked with us on trying to resolve our concerns, so I want to acknowledge him and thank him for his patience he has given us as we tackled our concerns. Can I also acknowledge staff, especially with all the questions and the well thought out answers you gave back? That was very good. You guys have done an outstanding job trying to make this law work as best you can for our city. You have been creative and really tried to address our community's concern about sunlight especially. These qualifying matters are our only way to try and get the law to work for our city. It is not ideal, but our team have developed these the best they can to implement the law that will work for Christchurch. Something that is important to remember is that putting these matters into the draft plan, then residents can comment on them and submit. This is really important to remember, and we should note that by including the qualifying matter on sunlight hours, residents can submit on this factor and whether or not they agree with it. So we've run out of road. We've been given a clear signal that if we do not notify, the government has the power to come in and put in a law without any qualifying matters to reflect our city's needs. We won't get the chance to try and develop qualifying matters which help us in some way, in some say, what happens in our community. For that reason, I do not see we have any other choice but to progress to the next step in the process. Giving the community a say on our proposal, this isn't the final decision, it's the start of a public engagement process before we come back again in 2024 to make the final decision. I know this will upset many people. I'm not happy to do it, but we need to get through it before we need to get through it before we don't get a say anyway. We will work with our residents through this process to answer their questions, provide them with information and help them navigate the hearings process. So I'm under no illusion that we won't get another chance to have a say. So we must put this out for the public to have their say directly. Thank you very much. So I will now put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Those against?
Hang on, Mr. Marks.
Is it at all possible for us to get item 2 put separately to the rest?
Yep.
If you like.
Yeah.
So what do I do here, Dawn?
So can members just indicate who wishes to vote against number 2?
You're voting against, sorry, we've got, hang on. Should we vote for everything except number 2?
Let's go for 1, 3 and 4.
Yes.
First.
Right, I am now putting number 1, 3 and 4. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Thank you. So now I'm putting number 2. All those in favour? Aye. Against? So would you like to just put your hands up for no? James, Aaron, Mark.
So we can register it as a note. As a note.
A note, yep.
Okay.
So that is carried.
That is carried.
Thank you.
Yes, we've got that.